Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Wilson, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority. 105.9 FM, AM 630. WMAL.
8:07 on the Morning Majority. Brian Wilson is in. Mary Catherine Ham and Brian Neiman are taking the day off. But don't fret, because my good friend Major Garrett is here to help me through the day. How are you, Maj?
I'm very well. Good morning.
You having a good time here?
Indeed,
You enjoying it?
Last jam-packed hour.
You want some coffee?
I'm good.
We can get you
and
some.
I especially enjoyed the catered buffet breakfast.
No, there was none. He went down to the
radio is the theater of the mind, and that food was theater of the mind.
He went down to the candy machine. That's what he did. Hey, listen, let's get right to it, because we have Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican from Michigan, also happens to be the chairman of the Select Intelligence Committee on the House side. Congressman, good to have you with us. How are you?
Brian, I am doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me on. Major, good to hear your voice.
Good to talk to you, Mr. Chairman.
Let's talk about this Al-Awlaki attack and killing that apparently took place via U.S. drone. And there have been some reporting over the weekend that says the president had a secret DOJ memo that authorized such action. What do you know about that as chairman of the House Intelligence Committee?
Well, I can't talk about a secret memo, or therefore it would not be secret. However, I can say that just as in the past when the Bush administration sought DOJ counsel on trying to determine if some enhanced interrogation was legal and what could CIA officers overseas do in the course of those interrogations. And they produced documents that said, yes, we believe it's legal for these reasons. You can imagine that exactly exists under the circumstances of Al-Awlaki. So,
from a political standpoint, Congressman, I mean, here is a president who really criticized the Bush administration for their very tough actions against al-qaida, the use of waterboarding, which was also, I think, approved by a DOJ memo. And so what you have here is, though, a president who's doing many of the things that the Bush administration did, things that they actually once were criticizing the Bush administration for doing.
Well, it wasn't just criticizing him, and they were heaping lots of venom on that, if you recall, during the course of the campaign, and talking about how bad America is and how bad the Bush administration was. And if you think about where they were, it's the old schnitzel briefing, right? You can fill in the blank there, but it's the holy mackerel briefing you get when you get in and you get access to all this information, that you realize how dangerous these folks are and how committed they are. But if you remember, the president said, hey, Gitmo, we're going to close that, and that's an awful, horrible thing. Well, Gitmo's still open because of the challenges it poses, because of the people who are in there who are awful dangerous.
I want to ask you about that, though, because I think you're right. I think there is this moment when somebody walks into the office of the presidency, and for the very first time, the CIA opens up all of the deep, dark secrets and all of the information and lays and paints a picture of the world and tells you all of the things you have at your disposal. It must be a life-changing moment when that occurs.
Well, it has to be. I mean, and, as a chairman of the Intelligence Committee, we get all of that, and I'll tell you, there's lots of sleepless nights knowing what's out there, and that's why we often said we need to encourage our men and women of the intelligence services, not berate them. And I think the president went through that. I mean, clearly, Guantanamo, as I said, is still open. He still has military tribunals. Remember, that was going to go away. Still has those. He still keeps the option open for enhanced interrogation, which, remember, he said was the greatest evil ever. He now has clearly believed it was in the nation's best interest from a national security perspective to take Al-Awlaki off the battlefield, which, by the way, was policies put in place when George Bush was president. So all of those things are continuing in the war on terror because again, the level of threat to the United States is very real. Real lives will be lost, and I think it's prudent that we take every opportunity we can to eliminate the threat, and I think that's what you saw happen. And, Brian, I got to tell you, I'm not sure why all the big hoopla. This is somebody who self-renounced his own citizenship, who's declared war on the United States.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a problem. I think he should have been taken out.
He's joined an organization that declared war on the United States, and he was participating in combat operations, if you will, against the United States. I know the left is up in arms, but I wish they would look at this in the terms of which we find it, not some theoretical textbook view of the thing.
Mr. Chairman, it's not going to be your call entirely, but do you think that Department of Justice memorandum should be made public? The administration had no compunction about releasing previous Bush-era memos on similar issues.
I think that their legal findings ought to be made public. I don't have any problem with it. I don't think there's anything in the legal finding in the legal counsel. What I don't think should happen is they shouldn't try to prosecute those folks for actually, A, conducting the operation that legally they gave a memo for, and, by the way, they'll go after the lawyers who offered their opinions on what was legal and what was not.
Now, there's a sense.
You recall in the Bush administration, they were very confusing. They went after the CIA officers, and they actually dragged the attorneys through a bit of trouble as well. And
right.
I thought all of that was inappropriate. I think it would be inappropriate here as well, but I do think they ought to make it public.
Al-Awlaki was first a sort of internet rhetorician, and then he became an operational force. Do you think there are more Al-Awlakis out there, or for a time, operationally, the United States and its coalition partners here, but principally the United States, have a bit of an upper hand after the Osama bin Laden operation and this one?
Well, I think it's a huge psychological blow, but we have to remember he was not. He was part of AQAP in the Arabian Peninsula, al-qaida in the Arabian Peninsula. He wasn't a senior member. He was a high-profile member. So he was probably 4 or 5 in the command list in AQAP. His focus, and he was passionately focused on the United States because he was a citizen here, because he grew up here, he was educated here, he knew American Muslims. That's what made him so dangerous when he decided that he was going to assume that role of trying to radicalize Americans to commit acts of terrorism here. And he was very operational. So in that sense, yes, we were able to take this is a psychological blow for them and a real substantive interruption in their ability to conduct operations here. That being said, the top 4 or 3 or 4 individuals in AQAP are still around, understand his value, understand why we wanted to get him so bad, and I think we'll work pretty darn hard to replace him with somebody that can offer at least similar opportunities to radicalize here in the United States.
Picking up on that point, Mr. Chairman, there were comments from the government over the weekend that there might be an elevated risk of retaliation. Do you think that's a legitimate risk right now?
I think any time that we take a major figure in al-qaida that is well known amongst the organization worldwide, you run that risk. And you remember, Zawahiri is still out there. He's the number 2 guy. He was a core al-Qaeda leader forever. He was Osama bin Laden's number 2. He's now been promoted to number 1. He wants a victory here. He wants to score a point here so that he can show his followers and the people who send money that they are alive and well and willing to conduct an operation. And that's one of the things that we are very concerned about.
Right.
And spend a lot of time trying to make sure that we can disrupt. And that's why an aggressive policy like was started under Bush and to Obama's credit, carried on under his administration,
right,
is so successful in stopping an attack here.
Congressman, I want to call an audible here. Would you be willing to hang with us through weather and traffic? I have a couple more questions I'd like to ask you. You got a second you can hang with us?
I do, because I got to get in the car in a minute, so I want to hear the weather and traffic.
All right. Well, hang on. We'll be right back with you. Congressman Mike Rogers, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. It's 8:15. Congressman Mike Rogers is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's on the line with us. He's agreed graciously to hang on for just a moment longer. I hope I haven't worn out my welcome with you, Congressman.
Not at all.
All right, here's a couple quick questions. Libya, where is Muammar Gaddafi?
Well, I think you're going to find him where the fighting is worst, in the sense that he's pulling together his most loyal supporters. So he's going to be in a village that has passionate support for him and believes that they have nothing to lose, given the fact that if the rebels win, their livelihoods and their way of life is eliminated. So it could be Sirte, it could be other places around Libya where.
But you think he's still in Libya for sure?
I don't know. We can't say for sure, but
right.
It'd be my guess that he's still in Libya.
I would imagine this is a high priority for the U.S. intelligence community right now to try to find exactly where he might be.
Not only to find him, but we've been pushing pretty hard to make sure that we get a handle on the weapon systems that he has.
Right.
That are very, very dangerous in the hands of bad.
Are you concerned about those Stinger missiles that apparently are missing? Those shoulder-launched missiles.
These are mobile, shoulder-fired anti-aircraft missiles, and as I have said since the beginning, that should be the number one thing we work to try to get off the battlefield. He also has chemical weapons. I feel a little better about that stockpile, that we're getting a handle on that. It's these Stinger missiles that are concerning.
I can imagine. Iranian nukes. What is our current assessment of Iran's ability to create nuclear weapons?
Well, they're well on their way. They have, I think they're getting closer by the day, and I think the more we dither as an international community, the higher price we're going to pay when and if Iran goes nuclear. And when is not, it's not certain for sure that they will get there. They will if we don't do anything. They think they have the capacity. They've done the missile research so that they can fire them. The last trick is, can they weaponize it? And I think that's the most difficult thing. But they're well on their way to that. So they've developed the capability to enrich uranium so that they can use it in a nuclear bomb. They've got the missile capability now. As a matter of, can they put the two together? And that's what we think they're working on.
Mr. Chairman, a couple of other issues outside of the intelligence world. Are you a fan or a supporter of the Super Committee, and are you optimistic that it will achieve its goals? In the light that it's not only being asked to deal with deficit reduction, it's maybe asked to deal with the president's jobs bill, the doc fix may be thrown in there. I've even heard talk on the Hill that the farm bill might be thrown on the backs of the Super Committee as well.
I'm not a big fan of that. I don't think they should have called it the Super Committee. It is a committee that is designed to find $1.5 trillion in cuts. My argument, the more you ask them to do, the less likely that is going to happen. We have other committees here, and by the way, this does not circumvent regular order in the House of Representatives. So if there's something that changes, we can step in and pass law like we should, or legislate like we should. I think it should focus on the cuts, and I think together we ought to focus on other opportunities. The one reason I thought this was good, it doesn't get talked about a lot, is it forces the Senate to vote on the balanced budget amendment. And America, I think, is solidly behind this. And the Senate didn't have to do that before, but as an agreement to this super committee, one of the agreements was they had to vote on the balanced budget amendment. So I would refocus the committee. I'd stop throwing assignments their way. Again, the more difficult you make it and the more complicated, I think the less likely for success.
I often like to ask this last question of anybody who's plugged into our national security system and has a greater worldview than the rest of us have. As you look at the world today, what should be the greater concern of the United States? Russia? Hold it. Russia?
I think you have to multitask here.
Russia or China?
Well, I would argue, China certainly is a growing problem. My concern is that we're not really ready for the cyber threat that's coming. And it's not, some people talk about cyber Armageddon here. That, is certainly a possibility. But their theft of data at rest, meaning intellectual property that's sitting on someone's computer, is staggering. And if you look at the way China wants to steal and use that information to gain advantage in the economy, that is equally in our national security interest to be ready for that. We've got a lot more work to do. Russia is growing, and they want to get on the world stage. That makes them a threat. China is investing in land, conventional forces, unconventional forces, space, which this president wants to walk away from, and I just would not do that.
Right.
They are very aggressive, and we need to understand, by the way, that China. It's not when China becomes the greatest power on the face of the earth. It's if, and the United States steps up to the plate now, both economically by promoting pro-growth policies,
right,
and investing in our military and our intelligence services. It'll be if, it won't be when. And we can make that change, but we have to do it now.
Congressman, I appreciate your generosity of your time. Greatly appreciate you coming on the show. Please come back.
Brian, I'd love to.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, we'll see you up on the Hill.
Hey, see you, Major. We'll look forward to talking to you.